Coming to you from Brick House in downtown Brooklyn, this is 112BK. On the show today, the ongoing trial of members of the alleged sex cult NXIVM. We'll give you an update. Plus, Jarrett Murphy will talk to Suraj Patel, candidate for Congress on the heels of his debate with the incumbent Carolyn Maloney. And then, a Bay Ridge institution, Tanner-een, releases another cookbook. Hi, welcome to the show. I'm Ross Tuttle, filling in for Ashley Ford, joined by producer Shirin Barghi, who was out yesterday covering the latest hearing at a Brooklyn court in the case against alleged sex cult NXIVM and their members. In case you don't remember, this is the Albany-based quote-unquote self-help organization which apparently moved some operations to Brooklyn and whose head, Keith Raniere, was arrested in Mexico earlier this year on a tip that he'd been engaging in sex trafficking and sexual slavery. It has also engulfed Smallville actress Allison Mack. Welcome, Shirin.
Thank you, Ross.
So can you just bring us up to speed? So yesterday this was a status conference where they discussed a bail package proposed by the lawyers for the alleged cult leader, Keith Raniere.
Correct. So the main thing that happened yesterday was that the $10 million bail package that was proposed by Raniere's lawyers was dismissed by the judge. And this would have included that him being removed from the Metropolitan Detention Center right here in Brooklyn and moved to an apartment again in Brooklyn where he'd be watched 24/7 by armed security guards.
So it'd be like supervised kind of release,
Yeah,
but they still denied it because they were worried he was a flight risk.
Yeah, they said that he's a flight risk, and also the judge said that it's absurd to have like armed security guards, basically.
It's a huge expense.
Yeah, it is. And
well, so you spoke to a couple women about why it was important that bail be denied. You have an audio recording of that conversation that we're about to play. Can you first tell us who are Catherine Oxenberg and Tony Natalie? So
Catherine Oxenberg is an actress. She's mostly famous for playing in the 1980s hit soap opera Dynasty. She was there because her daughter, India Oxenberg, is one of the main people in the cult. Now they've been estranged, even though it was Catherine Oxenberg who introduced India to NXIVM in the first place, and now she's having a lot of guilt about doing that. And ever since for years she's trying to basically to get India out.
And Tony Natalie is?
And Tony Natalie is Raniere's girlfriend of 8 years, who she told me that Raniere has been stalking her and using the legal system as his weapon of choice to basically just bring her to her knees.
Wow. Okay, so we're going to listen to that.
The reason that I came today was to make sure that the judge saw that there were people here. And yes, there is a fear because there's a lot of wealth and there's a lot of power. And the amount of money that backs him, I mean, was he trying to be El Chapo and create his own El Vanguard prison? It was ridiculous. But there was a possibility, and it would be frightening. I speak to a lot of people, and my phone's going to blow up. People are afraid that he's actually going to get was going to get away. Yeah. And so they're waiting to hear from me that the courts did not allow him bail, and they were afraid. So what this does is allow more victims to come forward because there's a lot more that's going to come out.
Claire Bronfman just purchased another private plane, which is held in the name of a trust, and we just found out that information yesterday. So I think the judge is 100% correct. I think Keith Raniere is a flight risk and that she would have taken him out of the country.
There's a mention in here about Claire Bronfman, the Seagram's heiress, but she wasn't mentioned in court, and there was some sort of dancing around her.
Yeah,
why?
She was like mentioned, but she wasn't really mentioned. But everyone knew that when they talked about basically superseding indictment was coming in about 4 to 6 weeks, and there would be additional charges filed against like other key people in NXIVM. Everyone knew that they were talking about Claire Bronfman.
But it wasn't stated explicitly.
It wasn't explicitly stated.
Sorry, we're out of time, so we have to end things here. But thank you, Shirin, for going yesterday, and we'll look forward to future updates.
Thank you, Ross.
Coming up, Jarrett Murphy talks with Suraj Patel, candidate for New York's 12th District Congressional seat, which includes Greenpoint and Williamsburg. Don't go away.
In less than 2 weeks, the first of 4 2018 election days will be here. Tuesday, June 26th, is New York's federal primary day. Most of the attention in the 5 boroughs has been focused on Staten Island, where Republican Michael Grimm is trying to take back the office Dan Donovan won after Grimm went to federal prison, and a slew of Democrats are vying for a shot at the same seat. But 5 other sitting members of Congress from New York City, including 2 whose districts cover parts of Brooklyn, also face primary challenges in 13 days. And one of those challengers is here with us today. Suraj Patel, welcome to 112BK.
Thank you for having me.
So what are you running for and who are you?
I'm running for Congress in New York's 12th Congressional District. That is the east side of Manhattan, from the Upper East Side to the Lower East Side and all of Midtown. And then on this side of the river, Williamsburg, Greenpoint, Long Island City, and Astoria, and then Roosevelt Island. So it's a big district, one of the most diverse, dynamic districts in America, and I'm running to represent it.
And you are an attorney, a businessman?
Yeah, my background is, I'm a first-generation American. My family moved to the United States about 10 years before I was born from India. And, I was actually born in Mississippi. We opened up a Tex-Mex restaurant in southern Mississippi as a family, which is super strange, in 1983.
An area that's known for its Tex-Mex.
Yeah, exactly, by a bunch of Indians.
Exactly,
yeah. And then I grew up in Indiana, but yes, I eventually I went to Stanford, and I moved to New York City to go to law school here at NYU. So I'm a lawyer, and midway through law school, I left to join the Obama campaign. So I worked for the Obama campaign for, the 2008 campaign, traveled around the country through 23 states in 7 months with the president, and then again 2012. So worked for the Obama campaigns for the White House. But I teach business ethics at NYU. I have a master's in public policy from Cambridge, and that's kind of my background right now relevant to this, which is, I worked for the best president of my lifetime, or our lifetimes, and I've been teaching business ethics at NYU.
I was alive during Gerald Ford's presidency, so I'm not sure. So why challenge Carolyn Maloney? She is, I think, running for a 14th term,
That's right.
A solid Democrat, progressive Democrat. Why is she your target?
Look, I don't think, well, first off, this is home for me. I've lived in the East Village for 12 years, so it's not like I went around and said, all right, this is my mark. In this case, though, I think that it is precisely because we don't lead boldly with new ideas and new vision and progressively from districts like this, which have no Republican even on the ballot in November. This is where we have the opportunity to boldly and intellectually lead the progressive movement from for the whole country. And Democrats just don't challenge each other enough. We haven't done it in so long that we have a 25-year incumbent in place where only 7% of the eligible voters turn out in this primary, so 93% of people are checked out. And I think that kind of complacency on her part leads to apathy in the electorate, and we need new ideas and new visions, especially from places like this. I just don't see the leadership. I mean, there are definitely substantive disagreements I have with Carolyn Maloney, many, and I think she's out of step with this district significantly on many social issues and on issues of war and peace. She voted for the Iraq War. And then most recently, she sided with Donald Trump to vote against the Iran deal. And that's actually the time I looked over at my brother, who I live with in the East Village, and I said, man, someone should primary her. Because time and again, she chooses to be, tough on crime, tough on national security. She voted for the 1994 crime bill. And one of the big issues of this campaign is to talk about legalization of marijuana and retroactive expungement of criminal records on marijuana charges. Because this country has 25% of the world's prison population, and we're only 5% of the world's population.
So you looked over your brother, said someone should primary her, but in fact, 2 people planned to primary Congresswoman Maloney. One of them you sued to get him off the ballot.
Absolutely.
Why?
Because the Board of Elections requires us to go through this, big process of collecting valid signatures, and we did. We realized that. One of the people turned in significantly less signatures than were required to get on the ballot. And for whatever reason, the BOE wasn't enforcing its own rules this one time. And the other person had significantly fraudulent signatures. And it was, proven, and so the BOE had to act.
So you're elected to Congress in November. What's on the agenda? What would you say your top 1 or 2 priorities?
Well, I think, we started talking a lot, and still do, about democratic reform. Gerrymandering, voter suppression, and money in politics have significantly skewed our outcomes so that the representation we have and the policies we get are significantly sort of older, whiter, and more conservative than the population as a whole. 98% of Americans want action on gun control. We don't get it because of gerrymandering and money in politics. You know, my opponent takes corporate PAC money. I'm a lawyer. I'm a business ethics professor. I've been talking about this and teaching, you know, doing continuing legal education training with a company called Talks on Law, teaching people about gerrymandering and voter suppression for a couple of years now. And this is crazy to me that you are in one of the most progressive districts in America, and you accept corporate PAC money from the very same companies you regulate. Congresswoman voted with Republicans in 2013 to gut Dodd-Frank against the wishes of the Obama administration. And since then has received about $3 million from Wall Street for her campaigns. And I just think that this is absurd. So
for an insurgent candidate, your fundraising has been fairly successful.
Absolutely.
For someone running as an incumbent.
Yeah.
Much of your donations, though, are from outside the state. I think only about 11% came from New York, 27% from Indiana, your state you were associated with.
Yeah, sure.
So why is that? Why is the money? Do you have a base here if your money is coming mainly from other places?
Absolutely. And the proof of that is in the grassroots energy in this campaign. You know, I've got 69 interns, 25 employees on this thing, and well over 250 active volunteers, such that every weekend we are out in all 3 boroughs of this district. We're not just treating this like one neighborhood, you know, which I think the Congresswoman tends to favor, but everywhere. And we're knocking on doors and handing out things. And the average age of these people, you know, on my team, I'm 34. I'm like the oldest person on the team, which is crazy. We have tapped into an energy out there, a thirst for bold, principled leadership, and the city is looking for it. And so we have significant amounts of support here, lots of small dollar donations from here. But then, yes, you know, raise money from outside the district because significant numbers of South Asians across the city, tri-state area, and country, and in Long Island and stuff, want to see representation in Congress that looks like them. And in all of history, American history, when a underrepresented ethnic group was beginning to vie for political representation, it was able to count on the support of, and there's nothing wrong with, counting on the support of, say, the Irish for Al Smith, or, you know, and so to somehow suggest that that's wrong, I know, like I said, an opponent once said that my opponent's getting all his money from people with the last name Patel. Well, there's 300,000 of us in this country.
It's a common name, right.
Yeah.
But the businesses you have are all located in Indiana, including some formed relatively recently. Is New York that business unfriendly that you couldn't start them here?
No. Our business, so we own a hospitality company. We have hotels and restaurants and things that we build and construct and sell and whatever across the entire country. In fact, very few in Indiana. That's just where my parents live and started the company in 1989. You know, hotels in Florida and places like that. New York, we have in New Jersey, but New York, I mean, it's just a different place to construct. And, you know, construction business is one that, like, you've got to spend a lot of time knowing your subcontractors and all that. It's a difficult thing to you don't just jump from place to place. It just doesn't happen. But back to the priorities, because I know I mentioned democratic reform, but then as the campaign has evolved, there is more and more realization, in my opinion, that right now immigrants are being persecuted in this country. Undocumented people are being, including just a few blocks away, you know, the DA here, Gonzalez, was saying that it is difficult to get witnesses to show up when ICE is hanging out outside of courtrooms to deport people.
And you've talked about defunding ICE.
And so I think the #1 priority for me, you know, on an instant basis, is to defund ICE, both as a leverage tool to say, Donald Trump, if you want to use this police force that you're using with impunity above the rule of law across all 50 states to make us less safe and to terrorize our communities, then we are going to take this tool away from you. And if you want it back, it must be significantly reformed so that it is at the borders and at our airports and where it belongs. And you need to do something about our dreamers and all 11 million other people living in this country. And Democrats just don't use leverage well enough. But this is a everyday, and by the way, I was the first candidate in this state to call for the defunding of ICE. Long before we hear these horror stories of family separation, these raids and all of that. This thing has been out of control for a long time.
Let me ask you about the district. As you mentioned, it crosses a river and 3 borough borders, and there's a corner of Brooklyn that's part of it, Greenpoint, Williamsburg. What are the issues particular to that area that you think you might have some influence on if you are successful?
Well, I mean, there's significant issues facing New York City right now that have been neglected for too long. Transit, obviously, is a key example. That the story of transit and the MTA in New York City has been decades of sort of spending a lot but investing too little. That the L train is about, I live off the L train, so I'm personally affected by this. But the L train's about to be shut down. We've known it was going to be shut down for years. There's still not a final plan as to what we're going to do about it. But if people have been thinking 5 years ago, you know, we could have at least given people enough heads up of what was actually going to happen. So there's uncertainty around that. But not a single person in New York City's congressional delegation sits on the Transportation, Infrastructure, and Public Housing Committee in Congress. We've got, in this district, the largest public housing community in the country, in Queensbridge. We've also got a significant transit problem, and there's no one out there fighting for funding for NYCHA, which had its budget gutted by $3 billion since 2001. And it's a question of priorities. It's a question of hierarchy of priorities. Where on your hierarchy of priorities are the issues that directly affect your constituents every day? Why isn't the congresswoman electing to sit on that committee and fight for funding?
That sets up my last question, actually. We should mention we've invited the Congresswoman on. We're going to try to work out getting her on the show. It may not happen, but for much of her career, she's been in the minority in Congress, and that could be the case if you're elected in November, depending on how the rest of the country goes. How do you have influence as one of 435, as a freshman, and as a member of the minority to accomplish some pretty bold ideas?
Yeah, I mean, look, so these are part and parcel of the same problem. I think, well, we're in the minority often because we don't lead. And when we did have power in 2008 and 9 and 10 or 9 and 10 as a majority in both houses and the presidency, we didn't do enough with it. And so when we talk about Donald Trump and the Republicans as being this cataclysmic event, but they're the symptom of a long-term problem where we didn't deliver enough for people. And so I actually think that, you know, this election is very important on June 26 to maximize our chances, at least from our voters here, to win back the House, because we're the campaign that's engaging new people, that's getting young people and minorities and immigrants to register, and we're getting people that we need in November to turn out and to work on and help out an election by example. So that's one thing.
Suraj Patel, thank you so much. Democrat running for Congress in the 12th District, Manhattan, Queens, and Brooklyn. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
I don't think it's a stretch to say New York City has some of the best ethnic food in the country, and Bay Ridge, Brooklyn has some of the best Middle Eastern food in the city. Much of the credit for that, though I may be biased, is due to the woman you're about to meet, the owner of Tanner-een and a James Beard Award-nominated chef, Rawia Bishara, who has just written a new cookbook co-authored by food writer and now two-time 112BK guest, Sarah Zorn. I spoke with them recently about their collaboration and about the food that inspired it. Here's that conversation. Oh, by the way, the book, Levant, New Middle Eastern Cooking from Tanner-een, will be available on June 19th. So Rawia, Sarah, thank you for joining us today, and congratulations on the new book. Could you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind it? Rawia, why don't we start with you?
I had the first book called Olives, Lemon, and Za'atar. And the inspiration behind Levant was the first book. It's what I felt was needed to be done after I finished from the first one, which was a trip into my childhood, the most beautiful memories in my life with my mom, in my mom's kitchen. The second one was supposed to be my kitchen, which is Tanoreen, which is my house at 89th Street in Bay Ridge, where my kids grew up.
Which is an institution in
Which
Brooklyn.
is an institution right now, Tanoreen. And I felt that time, but with time, that it was needed to start renewing a little bit. You know, I had to start making some kind of mixing things together from all the culture, from the pot, the beautiful part of cultures in Bay Ridge and in Brooklyn, in New York in general. It worked in Tannereen, so I thought it would work in a book because people love Tannereen. They would love to buy the book and cook from it.
And Sarah, can you tell us about your good fortune of being involved in this project?
Good fortune is right. I mean, I think that for both of us, the appeal was that I lived for many years in Bay Ridge, around the corner from the restaurant, and you can't live in Bay Ridge without Tannereen being your second home. And so, you know, I'm a food writer and have been one for 10 years and have experience in writing cookbooks, but it's very rare that you get to write a book about a cuisine and with a person that you already feel so intimately connected to and are excited about. So,
do you remember your first experience of going to Tannereen?
Well, when they still had their tiny, tiny little storefront, which is, you know, really what I think a lot of New York City at large was so excited about, because New Yorkers like to be the first to find this little hole in the wall and then be part of making it, you know, what it becomes. And so, yeah, I mean, Tannereen to me was a tiny little storefront, and you saw Rawia cooking right there, and you packed yourself into tiny little tables, and there was all of this fuss around this tiny, tiny Bay Ridge neighborhood, which is a neighborhood nobody traveled to.
Yeah.
Well, talk about the growth, Rawia, because now, you know, you have valet parking, and people make reservations. I make reservations. I can't get in without making a reservation. And that's such a terrible street to park on, yet you can roll up, drop off your car, walk in.
That's right. That's right.
Talk about the growth and how you've become now this large space that is...
You see, what helped really a lot is my family. Because without them and their support, without my daughter, she's my partner, without my husband being behind me on everything, because you need support. Otherwise, you will not cook with love. The whole thing about cooking and about the book is about family, togetherness. It's about putting cultures together. So we start with my own, and it did start with my own. What helped quite a lot is consistency. I really wanted it to work. When I came to Bay Ridge, people asked me, where are you from? I said, I'm Palestinian. They said, what, Pakistan? And then when I went to eat, there was no good Middle Eastern food around. What I mean is home cooking. There was hummus and baba ganoush and tabbouleh and falafel everywhere. But there was no Middle Eastern meal, a real nice hearty meal that our mother used to cook for us, and that I know from my first book. I explained it, how it came about culturally. So I felt like there was a real need to tell them how good it is, to let them know how good it is. Because I figured if they know how good it is, they're gonna love it, for sure. And that's how it started. With a little place, I would cook, let's say, 1 stew. And then with the 1 stew turned into 10 stews. And then we had to change the stew to something else really fancy. So we did, let's say, the fatti and the matloubi and all these very complicated meals that now in New York Times shows matloubi and they say it's a cake, a cauliflower cake. I mean, they're showing friki. Friki is the smoked wheat that nobody knew as a grain in the United States.
Wow.
So I show all these things in Tannereen. Every day you get introduced to something new, whether it's an herb or it's a grain or it's a vegetarian meal or it's a vegan meal or it's a gluten-free meal. It's all within our culture. All what I had to do is bring it out.
You started the
and cook it with love.
You get freaky.
Well, so Sarah, tell me, you know, we were talking off camera, and I've looked in Bay Ridge when I thought, okay, I want to try something different. You know, been at Tannereen a bunch. I don't want to necessarily go back there. I want to explore and see if there's something kind of like it, but a little different. And you can't really find anything like it.
I mean, it's definitely the best expression of Middle Eastern food as a whole. As Rawia was saying, you know, hummus and dishes like that have been sort of the gateway for Middle Eastern cooking, but very few restaurants have felt like there is a customer base to push beyond that. So I think that if you see more Middle Eastern restaurants, and obviously there's a lot of similarities in this cuisine with like Israeli cuisine, which is very popular, and you'll find it like, you know, these dishes all throughout the Middle East, and there are restaurants who are pushing the envelope and doing more of these like native authentic dishes. But I definitely don't think there's anything out there right now like Tanner-een that's in equal measure so wholly traditional and not afraid of that, but also so entirely contemporary with a very original artistic voice, which is Rawia's, and pulling in very contemporary, you know, ingredients and flavors.
Rawia,
Tell you
oh, sorry.
the honest truth, I have another answer for that. No, there isn't any restaurant
right
like it.
answer.
And I have to really be very frank about it because I tried. Every new restaurant that opens, whether it is Syrian, Lebanese, Armenian, anything you want, they have good restaurants, good quality, but they specialize in certain things. What Tanner-een was able to do is put all these things together. I will cook one dish from Morocco, and I will not put it on the menu until I'm 100% sure it is the right thing to do. And I did not do less for that dish. I did more for it, in fact, because I cannot claim it's mine. It's a Moroccan dish. But when we cook it in Tanner-een, we cook it in Tanner-een. You find Moroccan, you find Egyptian. Like, let's say I make an Egyptian dish. Can you help me with that? What is it? The kushari. Oh, yeah. It's a street food, right? There is a place for kushari in Barghi, but the Egyptian people that come to my restaurant tell me this is different than any kushari they ever tried. So that's why, you know, what happens in Tanner-een is I really cook with a lot of love. I really love what I do. And I'm always there to have a part of what's going on in the kitchen.
Sadly, we're out of time, but I would be remiss, my wife would be upset if I did not ask
no, please don't.
About the beet hummus and how we can predict that it will be on offer, because sometimes we go in and you don't have it. It's very sad, but I guess it's a
You
kind
call,
of
it will be in.
Okay, all right.
Guaranteed, promise.
And also there's the recipe, and also it's so easy, so I would never turn you away from Tanner-een, but the whole point is now you can make it.
You
And
can't
butternut
believe
squash
how
hummus.
easy it is, by the way, to make those 4 kinds of hummus we have in the book.
All right, well, great. Well, so the book is out. It'll be available June 19th, is that right? And it's called Levant, a new Middle Eastern cooking from Tanner-een.
That's right.
Okay, well, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That's the show for today. Tomorrow, Ashley will be back to talk about masculinity and gun violence, and a reporter on the commodification of the Communist Manifesto. Still beach reading for some people. Hope you can join us.